You saw the sign of the chart that was at the hotel where we are. There are 18 indigenous fish here, which about 9 or 10 of them were fished commercially. There were 3 really big commercial fish that were here. One was a sardine catch. And the sardine catch is kind of the common, ordinary food that they had. If you remember the feeding of the 5,000, you got 5 small fish and loads of bread, and that was kind of standard fare. And so the salting of fish at Magdala, the other name of Magdala is Terrakia, right? Salting of fish was an industry, and we know it's even listed in a couple places in Rome, where it's the fish of Galilee, the sardines of Galilee, were well known. They liked, and so they would export them all the way over there. And so the fish, it's a very fertile lake. The lake is actually quite deep. It's about 150 feet deep, very close to the inlet. So that's really deep for a lake. So again, it's the Rift Valley, right? So the top of the lake, 750 feet below sea level, and then the lake itself is pretty deep. And so you find these places great. Now there are the 3 big commercial fish are the sardines. Second is the tilapia, which is a bottom feeder, and that's the one that's called the St. Peter's fish. And the reason it's called the St. Peter's fish because that gets at one of the ways in which you fish here, and that's by hook. Peter, let down your hook deep, and you pull up the fish, and you find it the coin that you get to pay the shekel temple tax, right, for me and for you. So that's one way you fish. The third big commercial fish is called a barbel. A barbel is big. Tilapia get to be 1.5 pounds, something like that, maybe 2. Barbel is bigger. It looks like a catfish, except it's got scales, so it's kosher. There's also catfish here, but it's not kosher. So if you think about it, in Jesus' day, they could catch the catfish, but they couldn't sell them here. They had to sell them in the Gentiles. Now, what I'm going to share with you is really by a guy named Mendel Nun. And he is a Russian immigrant who came here, and Mendel is just a delightful guy. He was a kibbutz Engel. Died probably about 8 years ago of Lou Gehrig's disease, but he just stayed active. And one of the things that Mendel loved was fishing in the lake, but he also loved the Jesus stories of Jesus fishing. So he wrote 3 books. They're short, little pamphlet kind of books. One is Fishing in the New Testament. Now he's Jewish, but he loved the Jesus stories about fishing. So Fishing in the New Testament, and if you find it around, I have not seen it lately because it's out of print, but I wish it was available. So Fishing in the New Testament, another about the rock harbors, and the third is about anchors. The story of the book about the anchors is as boring as it could possibly be, so don't get that one. Because they're all stone anchors. That's just the way they are, right? The rock harbors are interesting, but fishing is fascinating. So what I'm going to share with you is what Mendel Nun wrote, and he lectured on. You could stay at the kibbutz, and then you'd get together and he'd talk about fishing. You could do the Jesus stories with them. 5 ways in which fishing happened. One I already mentioned was the hook, right? You put out a hook down, it's the same way that we would fish with a hook. A second way is called the drag net. And the drag net is a long, super long net where you would come off of the shore. Imagine that this is the shore right here. You would have 5 or so guys hold on to one end of it, and then you would row out. You just keep letting the net out, and you'd go like this, and you'd row up the shore quite a ways, and then you'd go back to the shore, and then you'd get out of the boat and have them there. And then these guys would just drag the net, and everything in it would get brought up on the shore that was in that drag net. Jesus refers to all of these ways of fishing in it. So if you'd start first by Matthew 13.
The kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish at every time. When it was full, men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into containers but threw away the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate evil from righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Notice the picture that Jesus says, like they take the drag net out and just pulled up. That's what it's going to be like at the end, where all people are going to be dragged up, and then there's going to be the separating. So he used the image of the fishing and the separating, because you got kosher fish, you got unkosher fish in there. Oh, by the way, you'd also bring up snakes. So think about this. If your son asks you for bread, you would give him a snake. To us, that seems strange, right? Or the other version, if your son asks you for a sardine, a fish, you wouldn't give him a snake. because that's what's brought up. And for us, you go like, fish and snake, how is that? If they're bringing up a drag net, you're going to have that in there, and you don't, so it doesn't reach in and grab the snake and say, here, son, here's your meal. Because if the Father knows how to give good gifts, so does your Heavenly Father know how to give good gifts. So he wouldn't go in and get a snake and give it to you, right? So there's the dragnet picture. Mark chapter 1 is another. So you got the hook, you got the dragnet. We go to Mark chapter 1.
Alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him.
Okay. This is the amphibalasteroi. It's the Greek word for it. It's the cast net. It's something called the seine, or sometimes called the purse seine, because it's a big round thing, right, with weights on the outside of it. And you've probably seen this, like, right? And they get it all bundled up over their shoulders, and they take it and they throw it out. And it's kind of an art to it. And it's a big round thing, you know, and it goes out there, and then the weights take it down like this, and there's cork floats at the top, and it goes down like this, and then there's a string where you pull it, and it's a purse. And so whatever that falls over, you go like this, it becomes a purse seine, where you all of a sudden now you could haul up this net. And they're casting their nets. It's called a cast net for that reason. Now, often when you do cast nets, it gets snagged on stuff on the bottom. So you're often jumping in the water to set your net free. And sometimes, if you're not catching much, sometimes you'd be jumping in the water and you actually are just going to take the fish out of it rather than lose it, right? And so that's not uncommon to do that, and then you take it, put it in the boat. But that's the cast net and the purse net, or purse seine, S-E-I-N-E is how it's spelled, purse seine. Make sense? So you got the hook, you got the drag net, and you got the purse seine, or the cast net, right? And remember the joke that a little cartoon that somebody gave me, that the disciples were in the boat with flying these things, and they, you know where I'm going?
Yeah.
And the one disciple, he said, no, he said, cast your net, not castanets. Yeah, okay. The other is called a combination net, or a trammel net. And so the combination net is this. It's 3 layers of nets. You seen it? Have you heard this already? Sorry, it's 3 layers of net. It's so the outside is a big weave. So the holes are like this big, right, through the net, right? Then the inside one is small, so it's got small weave, right? So a fish couldn't swim through it. And then the one on the other side is again the big one, so it's a sandwich. Big weave openings, it's tight, and then big weave on the other one. And so you would let them down in combination. Hence, it's called a combination net, or it's called a trammel net. And if you ever see pictures of them fixing or mending their nets, these are the ones that get mended a lot. Because here's what happens: the fish swims through the big weave, hits the small weave, spins around in there because it hits something and jerks, and now it's tied up between the big weave and the small weave. Make sense? Follow that? So it goes through the net, it hits the small weave, and then it comes back out, and okay, now it's all tangled up. So these nets are sometimes in such a condition that in order to get the fish out of there, you got to cut it out. So you cut it out, and then you got to sew the net back together. Hence, wherever there's a fishing village, there's also the needles in order to sew it back together. Make sense? You'd also then hang these up afterwards, and there's pictures from the early 1900s where they were still fishing this way. They would hang them up on a fence, and you'd go through, and then you'd wash your nets, you'd get all the seaweed and all the vegetation out of there, and then you'd look where you needed to mend it, and then they would mend their nets as they were hung up. And so if you hear the story, yeah, Jesus is walking along and they're mending their nets, well, they've hung them up on a wall or a fence, and then they're going through to kind of repair where they needed to be because it's the trammel. Sometimes then they would even put, they'd have the trammel net, and then they would put a veranda, believe it or not. They would call this, and it would be just like, it's like this wide, and it would be boards on it, or that had cork on it, and it would keep the fish from actually jumping over the trammel net. And so you would go on you'd set your trammel net all the way out. If you had a veranda, you'd put the veranda net on the top of it, and then you could row around on your boat and go to the inside and just slap the water, sight the fish, make them swim some direction. And if you make them swim in some direction, they're likely going to hit the trammel net. Make sense? Sometimes if you're really industrious, you could both set your trammel net, and then you could do your cast net on the inside. And so it's a whole fishing operation. So James, John, Peter, and Simon, Simon, Peter, and Andrew, they're in a fishing operation. They do this stuff all the time. Follow that? Now, when Jesus says, let down your nets, it's not don't cast your nets. Let down your nets means they've been trammel fishing. Because they're just dropping them down with weights on the bottom, cork on the top. Follow that? So Jesus, sometimes there'll be casting nets. Sometimes throw your hook. Sometimes let down your nets, which is the trammel. Making sense? All right, I go to John 21. Verse 30, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written so that you may continue to believe, this is present tense verb, continue to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. So it's written not so much as evangelistic, but as an encouragement for somebody who is reading this to continue in the faith. It's important as you read back to the Gospel of John. And you go like, what a great ending. You know, that if you were preaching, you'd at the end of that sentence, you'd go, amen. And everybody would go like, it's a great ending, you know. But no. John says, wait. Chapter 21, it's almost like an addendum. Oh, afterward, I forgot to tell you this. I got to stick it on here, but there's a great meaning to this. And afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Here it's called by its Roman name. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee. That's how we know that Nathanael's from Cana. It's mentioned right there. The sons of Zebedee, James and John, and two other disciples. I wonder if those two disciples in glory are going, how come we never get mentioned? Okay, two other disciples were together. I'm going out fishing, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out, got in a boat. That night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize that it was Jesus. Now a little bit further down, verse 8 tells you he's about 100 yards off. So how far is 100 yards? Any football players here where you can go, I guess 100 yards? Pick out a tree somewhere and tell us how far 100 yards is.
That telephone pole at the end down there.
Say that again?
And the telephone pole at the end over there. Maybe a little bit past that.
Telephone pole?
Yeah.
Maybe a little past that. You're going way past that?
Yeah, maybe to the water.
From here to the water.
From here to the water?
A little farther. Probably.
Yeah, probably. I would say probably from here to the water, something like that. You got that? All right. So think of that. Jesus is on the shoreline, and he's looking out at them. It's early in the morning, so there might be a morning mist, right? If you were up early this morning, you probably saw that out there. And Jesus stands on the shore. Now you know the story. Verse 5. He calls out to them, and as you know, in the Greek language, you can phrase the question in such a way that you expect a no answer or you expect a yes answer. And so here he calls out to them, boys, you don't have any fish, do you? He's anticipating their answer like no. He said, throw your net on the other side of the boat and you will find some. And then they were unable to haul a net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, this is John, says to Peter, this is highly suspicious. Sorry. I think, here he's out in the boat. This is now the boat. Jesus has appeared several times, and all of a sudden they got this huge catch of fish. This is highly suspicious. It's the Lord. And Simon Peter heard, it's the Lord. Remember, you had to jump in every now and then to free your net, so he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he'd taken it off to be doing the fishing. He jumps in the water. Other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish. They were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Simon Peter climbed aboard, dragged the net ashore. It was full of, now note this, what kind of fish? Large fish. 153. These are the barbels. This is not tilapia. These are the barbels. Now you figure a good night's catch is 200 pounds. A memorable catch that you have for you go like, wow, that's crazy. You remember your entire life is 800 pounds. You ask any fisherman, what's the largest fish they've ever caught? They can tell you like that. They know exactly where they were, what they were doing, they catch it. You know a fisherman, right? I mean, it's a really avid fisherman. And you say, like, what you got? They can tell you, if I ask you, okay, you a couple of you guys that are a fisherman, what's the biggest fish you ever caught?
Northern, 35 inch.
35 inch, where were you?
It was on a lake, Minnesota.
Minnesota, who was with you?
2 of my buddies from high school,
Yeah, what are their names?
Ian and Dylan.
What time of the day was it?
Afternoon.
Afternoon, okay. Notice, I mean, he didn't have to think about this, right? He didn't have to look at a journal to do this. Fishermen know exactly what it is. It's the way it is. And I noticed, large fish, 153. Barbels are about between 10, 12, big ones are 13 or 14 pounds. So just for the sake of ease of math, go 10 pounds. 153 is, yeah, 1,500 pounds. A lifetime big catch is 800 pounds.
And it didn't tear their net.
And it didn't tear their nets.
That big.
Yeah. So this place is kind of noted for this event in John 21. And so now they come ashore. Jesus has already got food for them. They eat together, right? They bring the fish up, and he will always remember 153 of those big fish. This is twice the size of a large lifetime catch. That's something? You're going to always remember that. You know, and you go, the early church fathers, what's 153? And some will go like, well, there's 153 languages in the world. And we're like, no, that's not true now. We know that's not true. And so what's the point of 153 fish? Or 153 fish?
It was a miracle.
It was a miracle. It was a lifetime catch. There it is. Now,
A lot of money back then.
they did. They did. By the way, every third fish is given in taxes. You can either give the money or give it in kind. That's the tax rate here on the Sea of Galilee. Oh, what 153, 51 fish. Go for the taxes and you get to keep up 102. So 102 is still a humongous, I mean, it's huge, huge catch. You always remember that. And I think of this because, you know, Peter then, at the end of this story, Jesus says to him, somebody's going to take you where you don't want to go. And he's talking about how Peter is going to die. I can't not help but think at times when Peter would be going through the hard times of life going, I know how many fish were in that net. That doesn't happen by accident. I also think of this. I'm sorry, I don't mean for this to be disrespectful in any way. But as you kind of live this out in your life, now the disciples end up on the shore and Jesus has cooked a breakfast. They're having breakfast there, right? And all of a sudden it dawns on them, hey, wait, we fished all night. And we didn't get one fish. And then you yelled at us. Yeah, you guys don't have any fish, do you? See, that's why I think Jesus and the resurrection were having a lot of fun. You know, doing this. And all of a sudden they're looking over at Jesus and like, you just told us this, and there were all these fish. And yeah, he used to see you guys. It was all night long you're out there. It's like so fun to watch. You're jerking our chain. Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, and Jesus has fun with them, if you will, in a way. He's keeping the fish away. Now he fills them into their fish, into their nets, and they come away with this. You absolutely have authority. It was the third time Jesus appeared to him as a group, it says in there in John. Now, why does he stick on John 21? Now, sometimes people will say, well, you know, he asks Peter 3 times to evaluate 3-time denial. In Luke 24, it says that Jesus had a one-on-one with Peter on Easter afternoon. Did you know that? Yeah, so he met Peter Easter afternoon, Luke 24. The two Emmaus disciples went running back to Jerusalem, and they said, "We've seen the Lord." And they're like, "Yeah, we know. We already met with Peter." So we don't know any more about that than that to meet that one thing. We also know that night he met with the disciples, 10 of them, on Easter evening. We also know that a week later he met with them, including Thomas. So this is not the first time Peter has seen Jesus alive. And he had the one-on-one with him Easter afternoon. So what is Jesus doing in John 21? And here I got to give a kudos to a friend who comes from, he was looking at Hebrews chapter 11, the Hall of Faith. And he goes through this list of people, including Samson, and goes through that thing, and he said this, he goes, after I read this through, I thought to myself, that is an awfully favorable take on these people's lives. These people of great faith. In Hebrews 11, there's a list of, he goes, gosh, that is so generous of God. And then it dawned on him, God rewrites your story. Samson's life. But yet he's a great hero of faith. John 21 is Jesus rewriting Peter's story. Now Peter is the one who can't get close enough to God, to Jesus. In Luke chapter 5, remember when Jesus calls Peter, if you're a Chosen fan, you know this so well. In Luke 5, when he gave him the large catch of fish, do you remember Peter's response? Get away from me, for I am a sinful man. Now, Peter can't get close enough to Jesus. Oh, John says, it's the Lord. And Peter's like, I'm in. And he can't get close enough. He's asked, do you love me? And Peter just says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. You know all things. And if you will, Peter's story is rewritten because Jesus always rewrites our story. It doesn't end with Peter as the denier. It ends with Peter, this great confession of faith. The church down here was Byzantine, and it was commemorated again to the Peter's confession of faith, and here it's called the primacy of Peter because in Roman Catholic thinking now Peter is set up as the Pope, hence this mosaic.
So the guy lying down on his stomach is Peter.
Well, I think that's the Pope, but I'm not sure. I would say probably this is Peter with Jesus above.
But which one?
And then
They just told the Pope Luther was right.
and then
I thought that was funny. I thought all these Lutherans would laugh, but they're
so
all
much for that. That's right.
Tom, it's the Polish Pope.
John
Polish
Paul.
one.
John Paul.
John Paul.
Yeah. And so then this church is built 1938 on the foundations of the first one. And the idea where Jesus had the fire going and making the fish is the rock that's on the inside. And okay, this was that rock. We don't know that at all. We do know this area up here was a fishing area. And so it's likely that at least some of the fishing stories happened up here, and John 21 up here is a good place to kind of remember that. Okay. Yeah.
Where do we put John 21 in relation to Pentecost?
When, time-wise?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the 40 days.
Okay.
So it's between Easter and his ascension. This is the one of the two Galilean appearances. The other one is up on a mountain in Galilee. We don't know exactly which one, but we'll talk about that up at Arbel. All the other resurrection appearances are down in Judea or Jerusalem. Other questions, comments? Yeah.
It's just, I have 4 of the fishing methods. I was just taking note
Yeah.
of that. I have the hook, the drag net, the net with weights, and then the combination net.
Combination net, yeah. And the last one that I would say would be you do this combination net and then you use amphiballisteri on the inside.
That's right.
So it's a whole combination, it's a whole system set up. Thank you for asking.
Is this location called?
Tabgha, 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 but it's a corruption of the Greek words hepta, which is 7, right? And heptapagon. The gon is a version of this word spring in Greek. Pege. Heptapege. So
Since the Arabic alphabet, P is pronounced as B. That's tabqa.
yeah. So there's no P in Arabic, so it ends up being a B like Banias,
But
Stepanias.
should be identified between the two. The other one is the Benedictine, this is the Franciscan, known as the primacy of Peter.
This particular one, the building on the other side of that fence, there is that famous mosaic of the 2 fish and the loaves of bread underneath. It's underneath the altar in there. You know, I look at this area and they go, this is where Jesus fed the 5,000. Couldn't be, because it's populated. This North Shore is populated. So this is not where Jesus fed the 5,000. We'll talk about that over in Kersey. But it's a place that's commemorated, and they built the church there. Other questions? 7 Springs. Corrupted name Tabqa. Corrupted means it's a shortened version, Arabic version. Does that help?
Yeah.
Not really.
Could you say that slower? Sorry.
No problem. Heptapagon, 7 Springs, is what this place is called officially. When it's Heptapagon, Hep 7 Pege Spring, 7 Springs. But an Arabic shortened version of that is Tabqa. Yeah.